Do you know this feeling? Tomorrow is an important exam, or the deadline for a major project is getting closer by the minute. You know you need to focus, but instead of opening your notes or starting the work, you find yourself sitting in front of your phone, one more video, then another. You tell yourself you'll just take a 5-minute break. But when you finally look up, 3 hours have passed. The strange thing is that you're not stupid. You're not lazy either. You know very well that what you're doing will only make things worse. And yet you keep doing it. It feels like one part of you is pulling the brakes, while another part is pressing the gas, racing straight toward failure. This is what psychologists call asterisks. Asterisk self-sabotage. Asterisk. It's not just procrastination. It can also appear in more sophisticated forms like asterisk imposter syndrome, asterisk. You achieve something, but you fear that one day people will discover you were just lucky. And ironically, that fear makes you unconsciously sabotage your own opportunities. What's even more important is that if you've experienced this feeling, you're not unusual. In fact, you're in the majority. Research shows that most people have sabotaged their own goals in this way at some point. But here's the part that many people find uncomfortable to hear. This behavior is not a character flaw. It's part of how the brain is programmed. Your brain wasn't designed to make you successful. It was designed to keep you safe. And sometimes, success itself is what your brain interprets as dangerous. So if you've ever thought you were weak, undisciplined, or not good enough, you may have misunderstood the problem entirely. In the next few minutes, you'll see why your own brain may be quietly working against you, and more importantly, how to take the steering wheel back. Because if you don't understand this mechanism, you might be sabotaging the biggest opportunities of your life without even realizing it. Stay until the end, because the next part will reveal the real mechanism operating behind all forms of self-sabotage. Now pause for a moment and try looking at everything from a different angle. Most of us assume the brain is a machine designed to chase pleasure. We imagine it running after dopamine, after comfort, after rewards. But if you look more closely, you'll discover a slightly uncomfortable truth. Your brain was not designed to make you happy. Its first job is to keep you alive. And to do that, it must predict the world around you as accurately as possible. Your brain is more like a weather forecasting system. It constantly asks one simple question: what is going to happen next? To answer that question, the brain builds an internal map of you. Inside that map, there's an invisible line, a kind of baseline. This line represents the level of ability, value, and safety that your brain believes you have. In simpler terms, it's the story you tell yourself about who you are. Some people have a very high baseline. They believe they must be excellent, successful, and perform well at everything. Others have a very low baseline. They quietly believe they're not good enough, that one day people will discover they're just a fraud. Problems begin when reality doesn't match that baseline. When a gap appears between reality and your internal belief, the brain calls it a prediction error. And to the primitive parts of your brain, a prediction error is not just a difference, it feels like a warning signal. Imagine walking through a forest and hearing an unfamiliar sound. Your brain doesn't ask whether the sound is interesting, it asks whether it might be dangerous. When prediction errors appear, the brain reacts in a similar way. This is where self-sabotage enters the picture. It isn't laziness. It's a strategy the brain uses to close the gap between reality and internal belief. If you have a very high baseline, but secretly fear being exposed as not good enough, your brain will try to prevent that test from happening. You might procrastinate. You might start a project at the last minute. You might stay up all night before an exam. It sounds irrational, but from the brain's perspective, it's actually clever. If you fail, you have an excuse. You were tired or didn't prepare enough. But if you succeed despite the disadvantage, you reinforce the belief that you're truly talented. It becomes a shield protecting fragile self-esteem. The second path is even more common. This is where imposter syndrome appears. In this case, your baseline is too low. You believe you're not good enough. But then something strange happens. You receive praise, a promotion, or recognition. Instead of pride, you feel panic. Reality says you have value, but the story in your head says the opposite. The gap between those two creates deep instability in the brain. To close that gap, you start lowering yourself again. You tell people you're overwhelmed. You insist you're not capable. You may even unconsciously perform worse, so things return to the old baseline. The painful truth is that you trade long-term potential just to feel safe for a moment. If you've ever wondered why understanding all of this still doesn't make change easy, the answer lies in biology. When a prediction error appears, the brain's threat detector, the amygdala, triggers an alarm. In that moment, the rational part of your brain is almost pushed out of the driver's seat. You shift into survival mode. That's why you know you should work, but your body wants to run away. There's another important detail. The brain's braking system, the region responsible for impulse control, can be weaker in some people. It's like driving downhill with soft brakes. You know you need to slow down, but the car keeps moving forward. The good news is that you don't need an expensive course or a complicated productivity app to begin changing this system. Sometimes the most powerful tool is the simplest one, a pen and a notebook. When you write down your emotions, you create distance between yourself and your fears. When you write down negative thoughts, you start seeing them as data instead of absolute truth. This allows the rational brain to return to the driver's seat. One of the most powerful techniques is allowing yourself to do something badly. It sounds strange, but when you permit yourself to write the worst possible draft for 20 minutes, you trick the brain's alarm system. The brain no longer sees danger because your goal isn't perfection. And once fear fades, action begins. That's when you discover something surprising. Most of the disasters you imagine exist only in your mind. Another technique is to observe urges the way you observe ocean waves. When you feel the urge to check your phone or give up, don't fight it immediately. Just watch the sensation. You'll notice that the strongest urges usually last only a few minutes before fading. Each time you ride out one of those waves, you train your brain the same way you train muscles at the gym. The most important step, however, is changing how you interpret mistakes. If every mistake is labeled as proof of your inadequacy, the brain will keep sounding the alarm. But when you begin treating mistakes as learning data, the alarm system gradually quiets down. You no longer need to sabotage yourself just to avoid being proven imperfect. If you're starting to recognize yourself in these patterns, do one thing after finishing this video. Take a notebook and write down the thought about yourself that scares you the most. Just write it down. Because the moment you put that thought on paper, you begin taking control back. And in the next part, we'll talk about the most important step in closing the gap between your internal beliefs and reality, the step where the self-sabotage loop finally breaks. By now, you may be starting to realize something a bit uncomfortable. The greatest saboteur in your life may not be circumstances or other people, but a very ancient part of your own brain. That part doesn't hate you. On the contrary, it's trying to protect you in the only way it knows how. The problem is that this brain was designed for a time when humans had to run from predators, not to deal with deadlines, exams, or major opportunities in the modern world. So sometimes it sounds the alarm, even when what's in front of you is just a challenge, not a real threat. The important thing to remember is that your goal isn't to become a completely different person. You don't need to turn yourself into a perfectly disciplined machine. What you really need is simply to adjust your internal compass. Each time you write down your thoughts, each time you allow yourself to produce an imperfect first draft, each time you write out a small urge instead of giving into it, you're sending your brain a new signal that the world is safer than it assumed. Those small steps gradually pull your baseline closer to reality. And here's the final thing I want you to remember. You are not a person who lacks discipline. You're simply someone who hasn't yet understood how your brain works. But once you understand the mechanism, you can start taking the wheel again. If this video helped you recognize yourself in it, write down one negative thought you currently believe about yourself. Just one sentence. That might be the first step towards stopping the battle against your own mind. And if you want to keep exploring how the brain quietly shapes so many of your decisions, subscribe now. The next video may reveal another unconscious habit that's been quietly holding you back without you even realizing it.